computer. Okay. Okay. Got it done. Okay, so this is the third and final week of Esther. And last week we hit record, but it didn't work. Hopefully this will this week. I think there's two overarching themes that we have seen in Esther. One is don't let anybody tell you that God isn't in lots of versions or translations of the book of Esther. God is not mentioned, but God is all over Esther. And the spoiler alert is he's all over our lives also. And the second overarching theme is that there are no coincidences. It's God's hand at work, and we should keep that in mind. Last week we ended on the end of chapter 7, where it said in verse 10, so they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the fury of the king subsided. And so a very big turnaround, obviously, and the irony that he was hung on the same gallows that he intended to hang Mordecai on. So we're starting this week on chapter 8. It says, that same day, King Xerxes awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai entered the king's presence because Esther had revealed his relation to her. The king removed the signet ring he had recovered from Haman and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the estate of Haman. Scott, do you want to touch base on that, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the point here, the thing that you have to remember is and I have it in this book I have read on Esther, that there is evidence in extra biblical literature, and I'm thinking particularly of the Greek historian Herodotus, that the property of a condemned criminal reverted back to the crown. So this was part of how things were done there. Haman was a condemned criminal, and so his estate went back to the crown. And further it says, so in this case, the estate of Haman, a condemned criminal, would normally become the property of the king. But of all things, the king doesn't keep it. Instead, he gives it to Esther, who in turn gives it to Mordecai, for she now tells the king about Mordecai's relationship to her. So she has broken the news that she's Jewish. She's broken the news that Mordecai is her uncle, and Xerxes gives Haman's estate to Esther, and Esther gives it to Mordecai. And once again, Esther addressed the king. She fell at his feet weeping and begged him to revoke the evil scheme of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the gold scepter towards Esther, and she arose and stood before the king. If it pleases the king, she said, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the matter seems proper to the king, and I am pleasing in his sight, may an order be written to revoke the letters that the scheming Haman, son of Hammedatha, and the Agagite wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how could I bear to see the disaster that would befall my people? How could I bear to see the destruction of my kindred? So King Xerxes said to Esther the queen and Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he has hanged on the gallows because he attacked the Jews. Now you may write in the king's name as you please regarding the Jews, and seal it with a royal signet ring. For a decree that is written in the name of the king and sealed with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked. Scott?
It's a little confusing. I think we've kind of got some idea, but the point is that nothing that's happened here, Haman being hung up on the gallows, being killed, nothing that's happened has changed the decree that those Jews were going to be killed. Once it's out there, it's out there. And he's given the signet ring to Mordecai, and he says, "You can write with my name. You can, you can write your own ticket here, but once something's been sealed, it's permanent."
And this is not unusual. This is part of the Medo-Persian rules, and it goes back, and in Daniel, the same thing happened. If you turn to Daniel 6, verse 8, it says, "Therefore, O king, establish the decree and sign the document so it cannot be changed, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed." So this was the law of the land. Once the king signed something with his signet ring, it was in place for good, and they couldn't just say, "No, the Jews aren't going to be killed on this day." Okay. Verse 9, "At once the royal scribes were summoned, and on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan, they recorded all of Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and princes of the 127 provinces from India to Cush, writing to each province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote the name of King Xerxes and sealed it with the royal signet ring. He sent the documents by mounted courier, riding on swift horse, bred from royal mares. By these letters, the king permitted the Jews in each and every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province hostile to them, including women and children, and to plunder their possessions. The single day appointed throughout all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar.
There's some things in there. Mordecai writes this. He has the signet ring. He signs Xerxes' name. He has permission to do that, and he seals it with the signet ring. And it says that by these letters, the king permitted the Jews in each and every city the right to assemble and defend themselves. So the king permitted it, even though Mordecai wrote it. It's just like Xerxes himself wrote it. And what he did, you can't revoke the previous order because it was sealed. And the order said, these people are going to come to annihilate you. What this new order does is says, you guys have the right to fight back. And so he's given them a fighting chance. But you see that it didn't revoke the original order because it got sealed. So when they come, you have the right to fight back.
And if you remember when Haman started this whole thing, it was 11 months ahead of time. So they have been worried about this for a long time, and now they get a second, the Jews, each of these provinces gets a second letter and says, okay, now Jews, you can fight back. So this is permission to defend themselves. It also says they can annihilate everybody, including women and children, and it also says you can take the goods. If the Jews wins, they can take the plunder.
It does talk about them riding out on these swift horses. Time is short. And so they get about the translations. They write it in all the different languages, and they send people out on the best horses available to be sure the orders get there in time.
Verse 13, a copy of the text of the edict was to be issued in every province and published to all the people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers rode out in haste on their royal horses, pressed on by the command of the king. And the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Remember, Susa is the capital of Persia. Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal garments of blue and white, with a large gold crown and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. For the Jews it was a time of light and gladness, of joy and honor. In every province, in every city, wherever the king's edict and decree reached, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many of the people of the land themselves became Jews, because the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them.
Yeah, this thing about other people becoming Jews because the fear had fallen upon them. The best I can come up with on this is, you remember when the Jews, the Israel, came up out of Egypt, and word of them spread. They fought battles and they won. And it says that God was with them, and they just swept across, defeating everyone. And word of that went ahead of them as that begins happening. And everyone was frightened. When they come to Jericho, the people already knew, Tamar already knew who they were and their reputation. And the people of the city were scared of them. And I think this is sort of the same situation.
So it's funny to me that they were, this hasn't happened yet, but the Jews were already celebrating and feasting, because the first time they had, and it's, even though something, not terrible, well, something terrible is going to happen, they had hope that they could defend themselves. So the hope, they were celebrating the hope.
You do see Mordecai dressed in these blue and white garments that are royal garments, and the purple robe over the top. Purple is always, in this time, it's always a symbol of royalty. It's not a real easy color to make. And good purple linen, good purple cloth, that's a royal, garment. And so he comes out from the presence of Xerxes, and it's obvious there's a new sheriff in town. And that's one of the things that the people are celebrating. One of ours is now the guy who's running things.
Because this kingdom of Persia is a Gentile kingdom, and the second in command now is a Jew. Chapter 9. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the king's command and edict were to be executed. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but their plan was overturned, and the Jews overpowered those who hated them. In each of the provinces of King Xerxes, the Jews assembled in their cities to attack those who sought to harm them. No man could withstand them, because the fear of them had fallen upon all people. And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai had fallen upon them. For Mordecai exercised great power in the palace, and his fame spread throughout the provinces as he became more and more powerful. The Jews put all their enemies to the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did as they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, including Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adilia, Aradathia. There's a whole bunch of names. They killed these 10 sons of Haman. They killed these 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedath, the enemy of the Jews, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. So those names that I couldn't pronounce, those names I couldn't pronounce were Haman's 10 sons. So, but the important sentence here, I think, is this last phrase, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder.
Yeah, that goes way back. And we look at this and we think killing the man's 10 sons, and that sounds pretty barbaric. And it's rarely wise to judge something like that by your own modern day standards. But that's what they did. But what you see is they didn't take the plunder. They didn't take their stuff. And through the Old Testament, you go back to when we studied about Saul and David, they would go consult the high priest. Usually those kings had a high priest sort of assigned to them. But the high priest would tell them, God says, go into this battle. And when it was one of those battles ordained by God, they were not to touch the plunder. You know, you in those days, you go in and you beat another army, another group of people, you just take all their stuff. And the soldiers, that's one of the reasons they're soldiers, is because if you follow a good general, you got to take all their stuff. And so they were told, don't do that. This is God's victory, not yours. Leave the plunder. And that's what we're being shown in that one little sentence there, is that this is God's victory. Don't touch their stuff.
Verse 11, on that day, the number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king, who said to Queen Esther, in the citadel of Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons. What have they done in the rest of the royal provinces? Now, what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what further do you request? It will be fulfilled. Esther replied, if it pleases the king, may the Jews in Susa also have tomorrow to carry out today's edict, and may the bodies of Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. So the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they hanged the 10 sons of Haman. On the 14th day of Adar, the Jews in Susa came together again and put to death 300 men there, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. The rest of the Jews in the royal provinces also assembled to defend themselves and rid themselves of their enemies. They killed 75,000 who hated them, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. This was done on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested, making it a day of feasting and joy.
So Esther's in the presence of Xerxes, and he said, well, you know, they've killed, what was it, 500 men here. What have they done out in the rest of the country? I mean, it must have been a bloodbath. He says, so what's your request now? Everyone loves a winner. I think that's sort of the thing. But she says, if it please the king, can we have another day? We didn't get to dispense with all the people who are our enemies, and we want to also hang those 10 sons up on the gallows, which we learn means impale. But it's a public display. It says you really shouldn't mess with these people. Look what happened to the last ones who did. And again, that to me, that sounds barbaric, but that, I guess, is the way things are done. But she says, give us one more day to finish the job. And they did. There was all through the empire, there was this, process of them getting rid of their enemies. And then there's a big day of feasting afterwards, and we'll talk about that.
And the things we read, and it's at first, like Scott says, it sounds like it's a bloodbath, but it said 3 times that they didn't lay a hand on the plunder, one, and then they did not say they killed the women and children. And some of the commentaries that we read emphasized the fact that the Jews took care of the people that had persecuted them, and they showed restraint. And from us, when we just read it quickly, you sort of get the idea. It sounded like it was revenge for the sake of revenge, but
I don't know. If you ask me, was that what they were supposed to do? I don't know. I have my doubts. The purpose in this was to rescue his people in exile, and they accomplished that. And the Jews are known to be a little bit vindictive. I could list several times through history where they gave the Maccabees in particular where they wound up, once they had liberated their own country, they wound up going out and conquering others. We talked about that. That's what led to the rise of the Herod dynasty. So, did they carry things a little too far? In my mind, probably, but I don't have an answer. We don't have an answer for that. But it does say, once again, actually two more times, they didn't take the plunder. It was not about let's go out and kill these people and take their stuff. It was about making a safe place for the Jews, for his people in exile.
The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and the 14th days of the month. So they rested on the 15th day, making it a day of feasting and joy. This is why the rural Jews who lived in the villages observed the 14th day of the month of Adar as the day of joy and feasting. It's a holiday for sending gifts to one another. Now, we're describing the Feast of Purim, and we're going to show you two YouTube videos in a minute. This feast goes on today in the Jewish community. And one of the things it says here in the Bible that it is a holiday for sending gifts for one another. We'll see when we talk about how the holiday is celebrated now, that is a key component of it. Verse 20, Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's a strange kind of story, but it ties into some of their other festivals. The people out in the country, the rural Jews, celebrate Purim the day before. And it says the reason for that is she asked for an extra day. And so in the city of Susa, they didn't get to the actual celebration until a day later. And so the ones out in the countryside, the rural Jews, celebrated Purim the day before. And it's if you were trying to make up a story, that's an odd detail to put in. And they do celebrate even today. Purim is a big festival, and that's what you'll talk about.
Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews in all the provinces of King Xerxes, both near and far, to establish among them an annual celebration on the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the days on which the Jews gained rest from their enemies, and the month in which their sorrow turned to joy and their mourning into a holiday. He wrote that these were to be days of feasting and joy, of sending gifts to one another and to the poor. So Adar, it's celebrated on the 14th and 15th month of Adar, and it actually starts, and all Jewish holidays always start the evening before the date of the event. So it starts the evening of the 13th of Adar and then goes to 14th and 15th. And this year, it is the 10th through the 13th of March is going to be the Feast of Purim. And we'll show you some pictures in a second. In 2021, it was February 27th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. So every year, the Jewish calendar is different, but they still do it the 14th and 15th of the month of Adar. And so the Jews still keep a separate calendar.
It's a lunar calendar, and so it varies every single year. It seems strange to us, but these things can vary a whole lot. When we were in Israel, most of those festivals that year came in October, and we barely worked at all. They had holidays all the time. But pardon me.
And we'll know for Hanukkah, you'll know when you hear of Hanukkah, people celebrating it is always at a different time. It's not like Christmas is always on the same day, or it moves all the time.
Mordecai, though, sent word out that this should be celebrated. And this is different from the other Jewish Sabbaths, Shabbats, because it's not ordained by God. It's ordained by Mordecai, and it is a celebration of this, great turnaround and great victory. But it is definitely not in the list of celebrations that they are supposed to make before God. Passover and now I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, this one is different, and you'll see it's celebrated differently than any of the other Jewish holidays.
So the Jews agreed to continue the custom they had started, and as Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, son of Habadatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast the pur, that is, the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when it came before the king, he commanded by letter that the wicked scheme which Haman had devised against the Jews should come back upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore, these days are called Purim, from the word pure. So remember, pure is the dice, and in Hebrew and Aramaic, unlike English where when we make a word plural, we either add s or es, in Hebrew and Aramaic, to make a word plural, you add the letters im. So that is where they get the name of the Feast of Purim. Because of all the instructions in this letter, and because of all they had seen and experienced, the Jews bound themselves to establish the customs that they and their descendants and all who join them should not fail to celebrate these 2 days at the appointed time each and every year according to their regulation. These days should be remembered and celebrated by every generation, family, province, and city, so that these days of Purim should not fail to be observed among the Jews, nor should the memory of them fade from their descendants. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter concerning Purim. And Mordecai sent letters with words of peace and truth to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Xerxes, in order to confirm these days of Purim at their appointed time, just as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had established them and had committed themselves and their descendants to the times of fasting and lamentation. So Esther's decree confirmed these regulations about Purim, which were written into the record.
They consecrated this day, and it's quite amazing, because that whole bunch in exile there in Persia would have been killed. That this was designed to be a genocide, and this turnaround is one of those unlooked for things that you say, well, that there's no way this should have been able to happen. And so they consecrate and convince everyone, don't let this memory fade from generation to generation. We tend to allow that. The Jews play the long game. They go into exile and they never forget where they're from. We've allowed things like the Holocaust to just kind of get muddied down and watered down in time, to the point we don't teach kids that much about it, and you forget, and things tend to repeat. They are very good about remembering, about carrying things from generation to generation to generation. And that's one of the things we definitely learned in Israel. And the Seders, the Passover dinners, they follow a form that has been the same for thousands of years, and it's virtually unchanged. The food is a little cleaner, the plates are a little slicker, but the form that they follow never changes, and they remain who they are because of it. It's no small thing.
Chapter 10, which is very short. Now King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the land, even to its furthest shores. And all of Mordecai's powerful and magnificent accomplishments, together with the full account of the greatness to which the king had raised him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and highly favored by his many kinsmen, seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all his countrymen. What sort of intrigues me about this last chapter is there's like no mention of Esther.
Yeah,
it's become the Mordecai story now. And it's funny, some people believe that Mordecai wrote this book, and we don't know whether he did or not. But, you know, when you read that last chapter, you're thinking, maybe Mordecai did write this book.
Yeah, it's possible. What you see in this last little bit is an attempt to establish this is historical. Now, we've covered the fact that this thing was handed down as a story, and we know there's some editorial going on in it. It probably is not an absolute 100%, but there is historical value, there's historical truth in this. And what this last thing is saying is, some of this is even recorded in the histories of the Medes and the Persians. And you know, don't you see that? Don't we see evidence of Mordecai in these old documents from the other side, from the other people? And that's really all it is. It's just establishing that it's not a make-believe story as crazy as it sounds. There's truth in it.
Okay, I want to close this chat window here. Hopefully I'm not going to mess something up. Okay, now I'm going to share a screen. I've got two videos that I want to show you. The first one is done by a woman who is talking about the purpose of Purim, the Feast of Purim, I'm sorry. Let me see, share screen.
And she actually is an actress.
Is it this one here, I think? Let's see.
The one who's not dressed up.
Yeah, I know that. Oh, that's the one. Just a sec. Stop share. Stop share. Okay. Now, share screen. I share this one. Share. Okay. Can you see it, Scott?
Yes.
Okay, participants can see the application, and let's see if I can.
Hey Grockites, today we're gonna grok Purim. What's Purim, you say? Well, if I told you that Jews had their own Halloween of sorts, would you believe me? If I told you that on this day we are actually commanded to get drunk, would you believe me? If I told you that men are encouraged to dress up like women, would you believe me? And if I told you that it's a religious holiday, but the book that we read on this holiday doesn't even mention God's name once, would you believe me? And what if I told you that the entire holiday rests on the bravery of a Persian queen who is Jewish, but she has to hide it because nobody likes the Jews, they hate the Jews, and then she has to reveal it, and OMG, she ends up saving the Jewish people. Would you believe me, or would your brain explode? Well, I hope not, because all of that is true. So what do Jews actually commemorate on Purim? Well, the story goes a little something like this. It all began when the Queen of Iran, Queen Vashti, refused to dance naked for her husband when he summoned her. So the king, whose name is impossibly Ahasuerus, kicks Vashti out and does a kingdom-wide America's Got Talent-esque search for a new queen. When all is said and done, a new queen is chosen, and her name is Esther. But her name in Hebrew is actually Hadassah, like the willow tree. See, she's Jewish, but she can't tell anyone. Shh, it's a secret because everyone hates the Jews. Everything is going fine, and Esther is totally slaying it as a regal. Until the king has this creepy, evil advisor, and his name is Haman. Boo! 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 And Haman is plotting to kill the Jews. Like he actually says, I'm gonna kill the Jews. Esther's uncle's name is Mordecai, and he's a really stand-up guy. But he overhears Haman's plot, and he tells his niece Esther about it. Together, they realize they have to take action. Because, you know, maybe she was placed in this power position to save all of the Jews. That's totally a thing, right? Right. So Esther comes up with this brilliant and brave plan. She invites her husband and Haman to a set of banquets. Haman thinks he's just there for a lit party, but at the second of these banquets, in a moment of supreme total awesomeness, Esther says, "Honey, Haman wants to kill all the Jews." And he's like, "What? I had no idea." And she's like, "Honey, I'm a Jew." And then he's like, "What?" And she's all, "I know, right?" Anyway, we can talk about that later. Right now, please hang Haman and all his sons. And so, just when all seemed lost, the entire Jewish people was saved. So, that's Purim. And so, to commemorate this miraculous story and to honor Esther's awesomeness, we celebrate every year. We donate money to charity and we give little food gifts to our friends in order to spread the love. And yes, we are supposed to get intoxicated if you are of legal drinking age, of course. Why do we get drunk? It's so that we can't tell the difference between heroes and villains. It's to emphasize the topsy-turvy nature of this holiday and a life. In a second, life can change. Esther was not queen, then she was. The Jews were safe, and then they weren't. The Jews were threatened, and then they were redeemed. Purim is super fun, super meaningful, and super empowering. It celebrates the power we all have inside of us to be courageous, to be heroic, and to be the deliverers of truth and salvation. Oh, also, it wouldn't be a Jewish holiday without a ritual food. The ritual food of Purim are these tasty triangle-shaped cookies called Hamantaschen, which means Haman's pockets. No one really knows why. And in Israel, they're called Haman's ears, which is super weird, but it doesn't really matter because they're delicious. Being Jewish is so much fun, but it is especially fun at Purim time. Purim, Purim. Happy Purim! Chag Purim Sameach!
So, I mean, that's sort of, I don't know how many of you guys knew about Purim, and we looked at it, and we must have been out or traveling around the country because we did, when we were in Israel, we knew about it, but we didn't celebrate it. And like I said, so it's like Halloween, and one of the big things they do in synagogues and schools, they read the book of Esther, and then they're big into booing Haman and cheering Mordecai, and all the kids know that. So any Jewish kid in the school system in Israel definitely knows the story of Esther, and it's performed. And they wear, the second video I'm going to show you is how they celebrate it in Jerusalem, and it's their answer to Mardi Gras as far as I can tell. And one of the things is they wear very crazy costumes. At first I thought some of them they would all dress up like Queen Esther and Mordecai, and some of them do, but they say, you know, they use these costumes to dress up because she had to hide her Jewishness, so they can dress up as anything. So I'm going to share, this next one is shorter, but it's sort of entertaining. Just a sec.
No, it's not Halloween, it's not Mardi Gras, and I'm not at Midburn. We are celebrating Purim, probably the most fun Jewish holiday of the year. On Purim, we dress in costume, dance in the streets, have a big meal, and are as merry as can be. People eat these delicious cookies called Haman's ears in Hebrew, send gifts of food to their friends, and donate to charity for the holiday. Traditionally, Jews gather to listen to a reading of the Book of Esther, which retells the story of Purim. Purim takes us back over 2,000 years to the Persian Empire, where the Jews were living in exile. The heroes of the story of Purim are Esther and her uncle Mordecai, who saved the Jews from a wicked decree calling for their murder. After the Jews overcame their foes, they celebrated, and so we celebrate today. So now that you know the basics of Purim, put on your crazy hat and come join the party.
So what do you think? Pretty wild. Scott, do you have something to add here?
Well, no, one of the things at the beginning, and I think we mentioned it, there are some people that say that the book of Esther was just written to try and explain the celebration of Purim. I think it's the other way around, but Purim is one of those weird things. This is so Jewish. They turned it into something it's not exactly recognizable, but they read the story, and I think the association is there, even if we don't exactly get it. They seem to.
So you can see March 10th through the 13th, and there's a few of us. Sherry, I know Sherry and Cheryl and I, we can ask. We have our office manager is a very devout Jewish person. I'm going to ask her if she's celebrating Purim on March 10th through the 13th and ask if she eats Haman's ears, and now we know about it. So anyhow, that was a little, to today rather than the Bible, but I thought it put it into focus. And we did end a little early today, which is okay. And we're going to start the book of Ruth. We're not like, there's only 2 women books named after women, and that wasn't the reason we do this one. Scott really wanted to do the book of Ruth. Do you have something to say about the book of Ruth as we started?
I love the book of Ruth. There are wonderful, wonderful things in there that are, very worth talking about, and things that I think are touching and revealing. So, stick around for that. It wasn't intended to do just here's the other woman named book in the Bible. I just want to do Ruth. This one was a little harder. The book of Ruth is gonna flow much better, and you'll enjoy it. So hope to see you next week. Is that it?
Yes. So you guys can unmute yourself. Oh, you want to say a prayer? Sorry, Scott, you want to say a prayer first? Sorry.
God, we've seen in this story the deliverance of your people, and we see in our lives the deliverance of your people constantly. We see that the violent overthrow of enemies was handled differently when you finally sent the Messiah. He told people to turn the other cheek, but we see a different kind of deliverance. We see the final perfected deliverance that you always intended, but throughout time we see you with your hands on your people, the deliverance of your people, and we're grateful for that. Keep our mind on that. Help us to see it, and help us to fully accept it. Amen.
Okay, now you guys can unmute. Sorry. I hope everybody has a good week and stays as healthy as they can.
Yes. Hope you feel better, Scott.
That celebration before. I've got a bunch of Jewish friends. I mean, I've never heard of it before, and it looks like fun.
Yeah.
But I thought you mentioned something that being around Halloween. I thought I looked it up, and then you looked it up. You mentioned it's like March 10th through the 13th. Is that when it is typically?
This year it's March 10th through the 13th. Like last year, it was at the end of February. It's always in the springtime, but it's the 4th and 15th of the month of Adar, which changes. But this year, it's March 10th through the 13th.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's like
Very interesting.
Cross between Mardi Gras and Halloween.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Mardi Gras, they dress up anyway. I don't know. It's like fun.
There you go. Yeah. Well, you guys all have a good week, and we'll stay in touch.
Read ahead.
Take care. Get better,
Get well, Scott. Get well.
Get well, Scott. We'll be praying for you.
And our prayers to Julie, too.
Yes. Thank you very much. She's the one.
Hadn't unmuted herself and she's talking. Yeah.
She's the one I worry about.
We'll be praying for her.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good week. Feel better.
Where is it?